morning. This is Stan in Gainesville, Florida, and you are listening to Light Talk.
And this is David in beautiful Long Beach, California. And if you don't know already, you are listening to Light Talk, and Stan and I today are the Lumen Brothers.
Because Steve is teaching, right?
Steve, I don't know what Steve's doing. I think he was mowing the lawn. Because it's so cool in Dallas, Texas this time of year. He decided to go out there with a couple of beers, and he said, I'm going to mow the lawn today. No, seriously, I think he's preparing for his tour. That's what's happening
No, he
today.
said he's teaching like these hours, but I could picture him in a pet sweat red bandana while he's mowing the lawn. And sweating.
That's an image I can't get out of my mind now. Thanks a lot, Stan. So today we have a very special guest. Herrick Goldman is here. Hey, Herrick, Thanks for showing up.
Hi, pleasure to be here.
Where are you recording from?
I'm recording from the offices of HG Lighting Design and Evoke Collaborative in beautiful rainy Times Square, which thank God it's raining, so it's been hellish all weekend, hellish hot all weekend.
Rain.
So,
wow, so we got an actual New York designer today.
Yeah, we've had a few. He's in good company.
Woohoo!
I know we do. We actually do a lot of New York designers.
They're so hard to find.
Well, I think they just go to New York to get the zip code. And then they work.
Oh, is that how it works? Anyway, welcome, Herrick. And actually, for people who don't know Herrick's work, Stan is going to give us a quick bio of his work. So go for it, Stan.
That's right. I've been exercising my lungs so I can say this all without taking a breath. No, just kidding.
Oh, boy.
All right, here we go. Let's see how I do. Herrick Goldman with HG Lighting Design and Evoke Collaborative is an award-winning designer of theater, dance, video, and live events. Herrick owns HG Lighting Design, Inc. and is founder and principal designer at Evoke Collaborative. Honored with the first LDI Retina Award for Excellence in Theatrical Design, a Henry Hughes nomination for Rooms, A Rock Romance, and Falling for Eve, the SES Big Apple Award for the Best Event Lighting, and the Live Design Excellence Award for Best Theatrical Lighting Design. He has been designing professionally for the last 30 years, with numerous off-Broadway and regional shows to his credit. His work has been seen on 6 continents. Recent productions include Aida, directed by Luis Salgado, and The Greatest Piano Man at the Flamingo in Las Vegas. Herrick's past includes teaching lighting design at MIT, designing attractions from Madame Tussauds in New York City and Las Vegas, and sued a metropolitan airport. Wow, what diversity. Currently, HGLD provides lighting supervision for Christie's Auction House in New York City, where he'll be selling some paintings. No, just kidding. He is an LD for Stage Network Studio Sessions, current productions in New York City, Puffs Off-Broadway, and Tinga Tinga Tales at the New Victory, which Herrick also designed for the Kenya National Theatre in Nairobi. He is all over the globe. Recent corporate events include ProMax 2019, United Health Group TC, Twitter, Newfront, the DGA Honors, the Jaguar Evoke launch for Kinetic. Favorite designs include Jasper in Deadland, Rooms, Godspell, A Chorus Line, The Who's Tommy 15th Anniversary at Broadway's August Wilson. Herrick is a member of course, USA IATSE 829, upcoming projects Indecent at Cape Rep, and Einstein's Dreams. Oh, we have to talk about that. At 5959 Off-Broadway. His work can be seen at www.hglightingdesign.com, and his collaborations will be featured at www.evokecollaborative.com. How's that for a plug? And what a great bio. So happy we finally found the date to get you on the show.
Likewise. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's great to have you here, Herrick. And before we go on, Godspell.
Yeah.
One of my first musicals ever.
Yeah. Well, that was Godspell 2000. It was almost 20 years ago. Yeah, that's but it was the punk rock version of Godspell that is still available on iTunes, if iTunes still exists. I think they just killed it. But I'm super proud of that show. It was everybody from that show has moved on to be a superstar, and the things we did in that tiny little theater with some of the then new technology were really great.
That's really Godspell was the first show I was musical director for.
Wow.
Ever.
Wow.
Yeah. So I was that leaves a very strong thing in my heart. Prepare you the way of the Lord, right? So listen, let's get started. Herrick, can you tell us a little bit about your early years and when you knew that you were going to be a professional lighting designer?
Am I a professional lighting designer? Is anybody
like when did you realize I made it? You know, like I'm going to make a living at this.
Oh wait, made? I don't know what that means.
Yeah, what does that mean? Who knows? It's the rent is paid this month, so I guess that counts.
Yeah.
I started doing. I had the benefit of growing up in a wonderful little town in Massachusetts called Longmeadow. And they had a wonderful arts program. And my father had encouraged me to be an actor and a singer. And I was playing around with lights in high school with TTI dimmers and old Lecos and a two-scene preset. And I was doing okay with that. I was still acting in the drama club. It was straight out of Glee. There was a chorus you auditioned for. But I also went out to when I was 15, I think I was an apprentice at Mount Holyoke College Summer Theater in South Hadley, Massachusetts.
I know exactly where that
is. Yeah, it's formative years, and it was theater in a tent. It was a 360-seat theater in the round that a company of 80 people built every summer. You build the stage deck and you build the tent and you put the seats in and you repaint everything, and everybody did absolutely everything. And of course the apprentices got, all the crappy work, which I now enjoy and revel in. And they made the apprentices work on every department. I went in as an actor. I acted in 2 plays and 2 children's shows. And of course I got exposed to the electrics and lighting department. And a wonderfully talented lighting designer named Mary Tarantino, who I believe
I know. Yeah, Mary's a friend of mine for years,
and she is
from that era.
Yeah, she's a genius, and I think she's teaching. Oh, where it's
Ohio.
Yeah,
Ohio
she's
State.
in Ohio.
With Dan Gray, who also was that part of that crowd.
Yeah, and so she, I was 15, and let's assume that Mary was 22. But no, I have no idea how old she was, but she was an adult.
She's probably a listener.
She can. I'm sure we'll get email. No, but she was fantastic and patient, and we monkeyed around on a grid and focused lights and asked questions, and you can only do that at night. You can only start your focus at 9 o'clock at night, and you'd work until 5 in the morning, and you'd go back and get a couple of hours of shut-eye, and then you'd be in the prop department by 11 a.m. or something, and then you do the whole thing, and you got to sit in on queuing sessions. And we did, I think it was 10 productions in 11 weeks, so that kind of schedule. And what happened was, I still thought I'd be an actor, and I went around to some of the really wonderful actors that I'd been working with all summer who were in college at the time. And I said, "What are you doing after this?" And those who weren't going back to college were looking for jobs at Denny's. They're like, "I guess I'll wait tables and go audition for the next thing." And I was like, "Wow, I am a crappy actor, and I'm just going to end up waiting tables." And so I started doing, I started doing much more tech stuff. And actually, my second or third season out there, I was talking with one of the actors who was going to SUNY Purchase. And he said, "Why don't you come visit me in the fall, and I'll introduce you to the techies." And I know it's a word that's loaded. And sure enough, I went and I visited SUNY Purchase, I don't know, fall of my senior year. And then went and visited and saw the design studios with, as you can imagine, several dozen young designers at drafting tables at 3 a.m, playing music and smoking and maybe drinking a little bit. And they were in tech on the main stage in the Performing Arts Center the next morning at 9 a.m, bright and shiny. And they'd do that all day. And I sat in on a couple of classes, and then they'd be back at the studio after rehearsal that night and working until they couldn't work anymore. And they were all wonderful people. One of those people became my best man at my wedding. He's a wonderful set designer who I think is teaching drafting at Syracuse. He's Robert John Andrusco. And I made best friends then, and I ended up going to SUNY Purchase.
Well, you talked about school, but when did you actually feel that in the profession you had gotten to a point where this was a sustainable career for you?
Back in the early 2000s, I was freelancing for a lot of companies around town, either as an LD or a programmer or production electrician, supervisor, or all of the above. And what had happened is the state had told these larger companies you can't 1099 people, which is a good thing. That's great. Except what it meant was they were suddenly, if I worked for $500 a day, I would normally get a check for $500. But now suddenly I was getting a check for $325. But in order to take some of these larger jobs, I had to put assistants or associates onto other jobs that were the off-Broadway show that was paying me $300 or something like that, that I could replace myself for a day on with one of the talented collaborators that I still work with today. Different people have come and gone, but out of my $500 pay, I'd be able to pay that $200 to that person who did the other job. Once the 1099 thing hit, or the lack of 1099 thing hit, I didn't have that $200 until next April when the Fed gave it back to me. So I was like, well, this doesn't work as my tiny little business model. And it meant that I couldn't take the little artistic shows that I loved so much that paid very little, but that I'd occasionally have to replace myself on. So I looked into incorporating, which is not a difficult thing to do, as many people are learning in these days, and founded HG Lighting Design, and found that I was now able to, occasionally support a team of people and take on larger work. And probably around then, there's always moments of touch and go. It's like, oh, do I need to keep doing this? My wife laughs at me because every August and every January, I look at her and I go, I'm never going to work again because there's nothing on the calendar, right? And you panic. You just panic and go, oh man, you've got some things 6 or 8 months down the road, but nothing big. And then lo and behold, the phone rings and you're off and running. And from February through July, you're super busy.
So with all of that, you've done some teaching, particularly at MIT. Why did you do that?
I didn't know they had a theater department at MIT.
You know what? They have a theater department because they can't have a football team. Back in I want to say the 60s, and I'm sure someone will correct me. Somebody at MIT said, "Look, we're churning out these really brilliant scientists, but they're taught specifically to work with their hand over their paper. Like someone's going to steal their equation or steal their answer." And somebody in the upper echelon said, we need to foster a collaborative environment so these people can work together as scientists and engineers and everything else that MIT puts out, who are really wonderful people. Of course, they naturally said, "Oh, we need sports. We should get a football team or a hockey team." And as you can imagine, people looked around the room and said, "Yeah, I don't see that happening." And somebody stood up and said, "Theater is a collaborative art form, and it would really teach these students how to express themselves." So they did. They founded the MIT Theater Arts Department well before I arrived, easily in the 70s. And they had a wonderful dance department when I arrived. I can't at this moment remember the woman who was teaching at the time. But believe it or not, she was teaching a bunch of dance classes, and we would light 4 or 5 dance concerts a year. And it was everything you expect. It was certainly not Alvin Ailey in there. But it was people working hard and appreciating art and doing everything that the arts and education should do. The theater arts department had spawned there were a couple student organizations. One was called Drama Shop, which I believe still exists, which performed in the Kresge Auditorium on Massachusetts Avenue, which I think is still operational. And Drama Shop had a couple of things, and they were sort of what like Yale undergrads, their student body, their student club of performers. So they chose their shows, and it was student directed and student run. And then, of course, the main theater arts department had classes just like you would expect, and we had a scene shop, and I taught both lighting and sound design. That was the whole teaching thing was a little accidental. I got hired. I had gone to Boston after graduating Purchase. I was running a follow spot at Nonsense at the Charles Playhouse for 2.5 years, something like 250 performances. And I was slinging a wrench at the American Repertory Theater. And I got a call that said MIT needs a lighting designer. And I walked in and met a wonderful man who's still a dear friend named William Fregosi, who was head of tech for that, and also an incredibly talented scenic designer and lecturer on Wagner. There's nothing about opera that he doesn't know. And the job was to do the lighting design for every production at MIT, which numbered somewhere in the high teens, probably like 16 or 18 productions a year. It was a part-time, at the time it was a part-time job, like 20 hours a week, but it got MIT benefits. Like I had the same benefits that professors had, which at the time in my early 20s was, it was amazing. So let me go out and do all that other stuff that I just talked about, that, just the thing, it took a big burden off. And one thing led to another. And look, you walk into a classroom anywhere and you're going to have some smart students and things, but you walk into a classroom or a load-in at MIT and you don't have to tell anybody anything twice. They're just, the intellects in that room are large.
But are they curious?
Absolutely. Oh, they're scientists, every single one of them.
Because there you go, because that is really what makes a great student. I could just imagine that these people at MIT would be fantastic.
Well, yeah, and remember, it's an elective, right? This isn't, it's, do the credits go towards their degree? Absolutely, but they also, they're there because they want to be there. Nobody walks into the theater department at MIT thinking this is what I'm going to do for my life, right? Because their parents are paying them to be electrical engineers and physicists and put men on the moon. Oddly enough, towards the end of my time, we graduated a couple of people with MFAs in lighting design. Well, gently. It's more, I sat on as a thesis advisor to somebody's lighting design, who ultimately became an electrical engineer. Thank God, because he wasn't a great lighting designer. But we started, it became a partial degree sort of situation. And I'm sure, if that person went home to their parents who were paying MIT money and said, I'm going to graduate with a degree in theater arts, their parents probably said, maybe not. Can you imagine? Let me explain how the teaching thing started, because it's, we were in a load-in. It was probably our second or third load-in and focus. And the students came up to me and said, how do you know where to put the lights? How do you know what gels to use? And I said, well, it's the way I was trained. It's a lot of work and art history and all this stuff. And they said, can you teach us? And I said, not right now. We're in the middle of a load-in. And they said, can you do a seminar on a Saturday or something? I said, I have to ask. I have an undergrad degree, and MIT is very specific. You can't teach there without a PhD. No professor at MIT doesn't have a PhD, although that may have changed in the last, 20-something years. So I went to Alan Brody, who was the dean of theater arts, and I said, the students want me to do a seminar. Remember, I only have a BFA. I know that's, you tell me, whatever. I'm happy to do a seminar. I'm available. They're great kids. And he said, absolutely not, because he was a sarcastic tease of a man. And I said, okay, that's cool. I'll tell them. And as I was turning to leave, he said, what do you do Wednesday mornings? And I said, nothing. He said, great, you're going to teach lighting 101. We'll find a room for you. I said, I only have a BFA. And he said, you know what you're doing, right? And I said, yeah. He said, you can tell other people what you do, right? And I said, sure I can. He said, great, you're teaching lighting 101. And next semester, you know what you're doing? You're teaching advanced lighting design on Thursday mornings. And I said,
I hope that their interview is a little more rigorous for people who are designing like rockets and things like that,
Who knows?
Yeah, you know how to build the rocket. Good, you're teaching the class.
You know what you're doing. Yeah, sure.
Sure.
You'd be surprised. Science is not that different than what we do.
Right. Can you do math?
It's a lot of experimentation. It's a lot of experimentation.
Right. And you guys have had this experience, but my favorite moments, and this, I don't think this is unique to MIT, but it's a unique situation where all these students, some of them were older than me at the time, some of them were grad students, and all of these people had been taught there's a right answer to everything.
Right.
All of their classes, because they're all in physics and all this stuff, and this formula, 2 + 2 = 4, and if you tell me it's 5, then you have failed. And you start your first class and you start saying, I want you to do a concept for your lighting design. Read the script, pick a script, whatever it is. Read this. Tell me what your concept is. And they say, okay, it's moonlight. It's moonlight in New Orleans, and Stanley Kowalski is stumbling home. And I say, what color is the moonlight? And they immediately say, well, it's 5600K, and it's reflected sunlight. That's the color of moonlight. And I said, okay, think of your favorite movie with moonlight. What color is it? And they say it's blue. And I said, why is it blue? And they say it's more romantic. And you say, and they say, so we can make the moonlight blue? And I said, you can make the moonlight green if you want. You just need to be able to convince your director that's the right choice. And from then on, I would get, we got ideas from these kids. One of them worked in the Edgerton strobe lab, the lab that shoots the bullets through the apples, right? Oh. You've seen that. You've seen those photos. That's a whole lab that basically at the time was dedicated to taking pictures in stop motion strobe, right? And so he was an expert in strobes. So anyway, we need the show requires you to strike this Edwardian house and end up on a beach within moments. And so this student says, I said, how are you going to achieve this? And he said, well, I'm going to fly in the first electric, and it's going to have strobes that face the audience. We're going to retina blind the audience for exactly 15 seconds, which is how long it needs to get rid of the set. And I was like, you're going to do what now? He's like, yeah, at a certain frequency, at a certain intensity, I can retina blind you exactly this period. And by the time your eyes clear, you'll be here. And I was like, sure. Why not? It was a concept. We never executed that. But those were the kinds of answers you got from these guys.
That's pretty cool. So tell us about your favorite shows to light. I mean, I heard you sort of like Tennessee Williams. Why is that?
He's so descriptive. Any playwright. One of the most frustrating things for me to light and to read sometimes is Shakespeare, because there's some time of day, but there's not. The artist, the playwright, isn't giving you too much information. And sometimes that having that latitude is great if you have a strong director and a wonderful collaborative team. But, you open the first page of Glass Menagerie, and right there, Williams specifically says this should be seen as if the memory should be seen as if through a gauze or a hazy view, because memory is not precise. And then, as soon as Tom comes out, he says, I have tricks in my pockets. I have magic up my sleeves. And you're done. There's nothing you can't do with that. You could put Glass Menagerie on the moon and make it work. It just, that's a silly thing to say, but it's true. Tennessee Williams gives you the ability to imagine. He just gives you that license. But he also, I just actually described this. I taught a class in Kenya to both young lighting designers and to playwrights who asked the same question. They asked, what do you want to see from a playwright? And I said, just give me information. And it doesn't have to be lighting information. It doesn't have to be the sunset was orange. It can be the rain on the tin roof and a honky-tonk piano around the corner. That immediately tells me that it's nighttime, it's raining out, so it's definitely not. There might be a hint of sunset depending on the rain and where they are, but you've got that scene. I can light that scene with just knowing there's a honky-tonk piano and a tin roof, and it's those little subtle elements from a playwright that give me a goal and give me something to do, and so that's why there are moments in Tennessee Williams plays where if you're doing it right, well, especially Glass Menagerie, when you blow out your candles at the end, but there's so many wonderful theater moments where if the lighting works just right and fades out on the last line or highlights the right thing at the right time, there'll be silence in the theater and a gasp from the audience as they get it, and that's the best thing. That's amazing to me.
I think that's fantastic, because you think about lighting in a very poetic sense. And I think that we all do, professional designers do, because that's why we get hired. And, for students, I'm talking about the average student now, mm-hmm. Again, there are exceptions. They want more information. They seem to be afraid to use their imagination and their emotional imagination to create an atmosphere.
Right.
And you're absolutely right about Tennessee Williams. There's a lot of latitude there.
Yeah.
I agree. I used that particular play in undergraduate classes, and I still have not found a better replacement for the reasons that you mentioned.
Right.
And that last scene, in fact, when I did a workshop for playwrights once in New England, in fact, in Vermont, and I used that scene, the blow out your candle scene, and the playwrights were all like, I didn't know that lighting can be so heartbeat to heartbeat to heartbeat.
Yeah.
Right. And
yeah.
it is, and it should be. And
it travels through time. Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. It's the poetry, and he's giving you poetic license, and at the same time he's giving you enough specificity for something for you to hang your hat on, which you need.
Right.
I think.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and it's just, but that starts the collaboration the moment you open the page. You know, and everybody else who walks into that, the set designer and costume designer and sound designer, they're going to walk into the meeting with the same little hints and pieces that you can choose to highlight or not. That the one production I was thinking of actually used Tennessee Williams projections. Did you know that? Are you aware that the original Glass Menagerie had projections of words?
Yes.
And
yes,
Tennessee Williams put that in because he felt the audience wasn't going to understand the words he was saying enough, which is incredible to me. For Tennessee Williams, of all people, to be he was insecure, but to not have faith in the words that he put on the page, that he was afraid that his story wasn't being told right, that he needed to embellish it with words projected above the stage. And it's amazing, but then you do it and you're like, oh, it makes things, if it lands right, if the projection timing lands right, then it enhances the word that was just said.
I have the next question, by the way. So we know that you're involved in a charity called Behind the Scenes.
Yeah.
Can you let's give you the opportunity to tell us a little bit more about that.
Behind the scenes, and actually, you'll correct me, someone correct me if I'm wrong. So Behind the Scenes was founded by ESTA, which, if you don't know, is a group of technical theatrical companies that look out for each other, more or less. They're just they're a group that does certifications and all sorts of stuff. Behind the Scenes, I believe, grew out of ESTA and Bill Sapsis from Sapsis Rigging, and it supports our brethren and sistren and other who just fall on hard times. It's not affiliated with a union. It's not affiliated with any individual company. Anybody can apply. It's been around. I want to say it's been around for about 10 years, maybe a little longer. And HG Lighting Design and Evoke Collaborative are very proudly, I forget the phrase of what we are. We're we're sponsors. We're not product sponsors, because for folks like TMB and Roscoe and ETC sponsor a product. And every time one of those products sells, a portion of that revenue goes to Behind the Scenes, which is great. And I urge everybody to do a little bit of research, go to the Behind the Scenes page and look at those products and purchase them. But we did, we basically share design fees, or it's a portion of our design fees from both companies annually goes to Behind the Scenes. And so far, I think we've donated, I think, about $3,000 over the last couple of years. Not that matters at all. There's no, everybody can do this. Absolutely everybody can do this. It doesn't matter if you donate $5 or $50,000. Like, the more people that are listed on that page, I know our friends, Brendan Gray with Gray Matter Visual just became a sponsor, as did Light Switch. John Featherstone, Norm Schwab, and Howard Werner just became a sponsor. And that makes me proud. It's nice to see the community doing that. If you go to the Behind the Scenes page, you will see, and that's on, it's linked through my website if you want, but just a quick Google, you'll find it. The people they've helped are wonderful. It's people who, have had something fall on them, or, stepped off the wrong stage at the wrong time and can't walk for 6 months. And we've gotten them a wheelchair, or we've gotten them to and from their physical therapy, or something that insurance doesn't cover, or, we hope everybody has insurance, and we hope everybody has ideally a union to take care of them, but that's not the case. And you never know what's around the corner. And it's nice to see our industry stepping up and taking care of its own. We're really all in this together. It's a weird little industry in that we we know each other, and we see each other thanks to social media, for better or worse. We see each other online. We're aware of what everybody's doing, but it's so rare that I'm at a tech table with a brother or sister lighting designer, which is, I'll be in a bar with them, but we rarely, we'll bump into each other, and we'll certainly see each other at LDI and the other trade shows. But we really are in this together, and I never feel like we're competitors. There's so much work.
Yeah. There's so much work and different directors. Yeah, it's a wonderful thing behind the scenes. It's a great thing because, yes, tragedy happens to everyone, unfortunately. And it's great that the theater people have gotten together and to do this. Hey, why don't you tell us a little bit about Tinga Tinga Tales Nairobi?
Over the years, I've had the great pleasure of working at the New Victory Theater on 42nd Street in New York. And if you're not familiar with it, it is theater for young audiences space, which if you haven't had the opportunity to do theater for young audiences, it is soul fulfilling. That's soul fulfilling with an L and several L's. They called me, Dave Upton, who's the production manager there, called me just about a year ago. And he said, look, we've got a show coming in the fall that needs a lighting designer. We think you'd be a great fit for it. However, they're mounting the show previously before their run in Nairobi at the Kenyan National Theatre, and they might need a lighting designer for that. Do you mind if I just do an introduction? This would be out of the scope of the New Victory's normal situation. And I said, yeah, sure. And this woman named Claudia Lloyd, who's an expat Brit living in Nairobi, called me. Turned out we had, believe it or not, 2 or 3 friends in common already, which was just bizarre. And she produced a children's animated TV series there. That's exactly what you would, you wouldn't expect it from the name because you wouldn't know. But Tinga Tinga Tales are things like how the elephant got his trunk, why the giraffe's neck is long, how Chameleon learned to change colors, things like that. And she wrote a musical. They did it they had performed it the year before in basically a revival tent in a field, and it flooded in the rain, and they had some lighting, but it was a big hit. They sold out, and they extended, and all this stuff. And then the New Victory Theater got wind of it and wanted to bring them over, but they also need to. The New Victory Theater doesn't have time to sit and create things. You get about 4 days to tech and get a show up. So they needed to get it up and running. Claudia and I spoke, and she said, we'd like to bring you over here. And actually the U.S. State Department got involved because they got a grant for theater education to bring an American over to teach. So if I taught a seminar, it would offset their costs. So in fact, I got to teach the aforementioned seminar to young lighting designers and playwrights and anybody else who wanted to attend the meeting. So I went there, and actually Dave Upton joined me because he needed to see what was coming into his theater. And we spent, I think it took about 10 days. We mounted the theater in the Kenyan National Theatre, Nairobi, which is a little worse for its wear and tear. It's an interesting space and had some challenges. We managed to source a bunch of equipment from all over Nairobi. Nairobi has a large music scene, and a lot of touring goes through there. So they actually have a fair amount of moving lights, most of them Chinese, and LED pars. We got some brand new Elation LED pars, and they had a Grandame 1, which I hadn't touched in, and they only had one of them. And one of the three screens was cracked. And nice. And that, of course, the screen that was cracked was the touch screen that every time that you get a question that says select OK, that's the screen that's cracked. So I had to use the mouse. It was fine, but your sense memory is all screwed up. But it did still play Missile Command or Space Invaders. So
that's important.
Space Invaders still worked. And actually, when I brought that up, the guy who owned the thing said, "Wait, what's that?" And I said, "Oh, you didn't know this did that?" And I just, great.
Yeah, my Tesla does that too.
Oh, great. Yeah, that's all you need. Fantastic. We programmed that thing really rapidly and did some wonderful stuff. So it's a wonderful musical, and we also brought Nairobi its very first scrim. We brought a black set. They said, "What do we need for scenery?" They had a cyc that was painted in these beautiful colors in a Tinga pattern. Tinga is an art style of painting, that's very vibrant and a lot of fun. And we had a beautiful cyc, but a lot of this happens in a rainstorm and at night, and there's lightning, and
cool.
so I was like, the stage is never going to go black with this. Oh, this is a great, you'll enjoy this. I taught, we were trying to figure out what color to paint this drop. And they wanted it to be blue. And I said, you've got sunrises and sunsets, and I think it should be more orange. And so Claudia had her artist friend who painted the drop paint a couple of samples on bed sheets. And I described gels to her, and she bought some gels. She got them shipped in. And in her kitchen on Skype with her children, she's got a pair of twins. And they held up the drop, and they got clip lights that they taped color to, and they put it behind the drop. And then on Skype, we talked about color and color theory and how it was going to work so that they could commit to the different paint colors that they were going to do. But it was kind of great. So I was teaching color theory all the way around the world to a dining room full of people I had never met before. And that was a lot of fun. But then we had to teach them why a scrim would function and how a scrim functions. And so we convinced them to get a brand new Rose brand scrim that I think Dave brought over. And so now there's a scrim in Nairobi that I'm sure has been used on 10 other productions by now, and I hope is still intact. But they didn't, it's funny because we think of scrim effects, and it's so painfully obvious to us how a scrim works. That's at the very least, it's lighting 101. But telling folks, this is how it's going to work. And you put it down stage, and they're like, but I can still see the drop. And I'm like, yeah, I have the cyc lights on. So hang on. I'd turn that off and be like, and now it's nighttime. They'd be like, oh, that's amazing. And then we put somebody, we did some tests of reveal between the cyc and the scrim and said, look, I can see them and now I can't. And they're like, oh, my, theater magic. But it was funny. I would say things to Claudia is not a musical theater person. Like I said, she did animated cartoons, and all of these wonderful people on stage, they're all musicians. They're wonderful singers. The composer actually went to Emerson in Boston, and he's a really talented musician and performer, but they're not theater people the way we know. So I would say, stage going black, and I've got no response. And some people were still walking around, and I hit the blackout button, and they're like, oh, that's what he meant. and my stage manager said, so the stage is going to go dark when you say, I said, yeah. And I said, ideally, people will say thank you, so they acknowledge that, and I know everybody's safe. And by the end, I was getting very hearty thank yous, which was fantastic. But also, I'd say, can we take it from the button, or we're going to go to light the button. And Claudia was like, what are the buttons you talk about? Are you
doing costumes?
Oh. Right. And she's like, oh my God. And, we'd go for drinks afterwards. She's like, Herrick, we're learning things every day. Like every moment, you don't even know.
That's sweet.
You say something, it's wonderful.
Yeah.
She's like, you say something about, something stage left or something, blah, blah, blah. And we've never heard those words before, and that's not,
they're learning a language. They're learning a new language.
Yeah, it was great, and I was learning Swahili at the same time, so it was great.
Wow.
Wow.
So you brought them the fundamentals of theater magic, which leads me to my next question, which is to have you speculate perhaps on what you think of the state of the industry and where you predict things may be headed.
I don't know. There's so much. I think we're going to see a world where some giant projectors are aimed at the stage, and we don't light a show with anything out front except projectors anymore. For better or worse.
I think
there's going to be things that are amazing that way, and there are things that are horrible choice that way. But we'll see. I noticed that we're losing a sense of angle in general. I think the ability to put, depending on the size of your stage, a dozen or 2 dozen or 3 dozen moving lights on a truss or in positions that, in regular normal positions, has eliminated specific angle choices and strong angle choices that somebody just said, like you used to see Twyla Tharp and Jennifer Tipton would take shin buster from upstage left that shot diagonally down stage right. Yeah, and that was it was the only light on, and it was a super strong choice. And of course, it was only for a few moments of a dance or whatever, but it was like this decisive thing. And I think we're getting a little more homogenized, and we're not making.
I don't know if I agree with you on that.
Okay.
Because I use moving lights in those positions all the time.
Sure, absolutely.
I'll put a moving light on a floor downstage right to do the opposite.
Oh yeah, and I do that. I do that as well. Actually, Stan can tell you we're doing that in puffs. But I also think that the danger there is because you have so many options. A director or choreographer or somebody will say, "I don't know about that. Can you show me something else?" And you're going to end up with something less bold and less risky. And I'm not saying that. Look, it's great to have all these tools. It's just the question in design classes used to be, you've got 12 lights to light whatever. Tell me where are you putting these 12 lights? And your strongest conceptual choice is going to be represented in that 12 lights or the 6 lights or whatever. And now you've got, and that's the other thing. Like I was talking with Stan about drafting at some point last week, where duplicate and repeat, or reverse and duplicate is you do half your electric and you draw a line down the center and you duplicate it on the other side, and there you go, and you've just doubled your light plot. Or it's like, oh, I have more lights to do. Great, let's just duplicate this and move everything 18 inches to the right, and now you've loaded up your front of house truss a little more. I think instead of drafting in pencil and thinking about where every light goes and where the shadow from that light is going to, or the shadow of the actor is going to be cast, I think we're not as thoughtful in the pre-planning as we could be, or as we used to.
Well, because it's gotten very easy, and I think that's your point. Right. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think you make a good point, and what I try and teach my students is if you had a light in every, or when I was coming up, we're all the same generation, and I remember thinking, okay, I've got these 12 lights or 15 lights, and there's 5 moments in this show that I really know exactly what I want, and everything else becomes a compromise. And so, wouldn't it be great if in every moment I could have exactly what I wanted? And now the technology sort of lets me, if you do that, reverse and repeat, and you've got a light everywhere you need it, but you have to be steeped in that idea that I'm going to make a strong choice in the theater, even though I maybe didn't make it in the plot, but I'm making it in the moment. And I think a lot of the young ones don't know how to do that. They just know how to turn stuff on and swing them around. I suppose David is a good example of he has a beautiful plot up there in Colorado, but he puts the pictures. I was like, this is a really strong choice. There's 3 lights on, or 2 lights on, or 1 light on, even though he's got a nice rig. I think that's the key. That choice notion doesn't go away because the technology is more flexible, and I think that's something we have to, as teachers, embed in our students. And I'm working hard at that.
It also depends on the director you're working with. If they're ready to take those chances. Sure. Right.
And I just did Aida with Luis Salgado, he loves it dark and he loves it sculpted. He's a dancer at heart, and he came to directing second, and it's such a joy because I'll do something that, it's Aida. It's, there should be some face light and this and that. And he'd be like, why am I seeing all that? It's like, take that off. I'm like, oh, thank God, and, you get this beautiful sculpted silhouette and, but that's the joy,
I love that. I mean, we did one in the fall where the student was young and the director was young. The director was a very well-known actor who was directing. And there's a moment and we're sitting there in tech and there's nothing really, it's a nicely blocked moment, but there was no light. And I finally said to the director, what do you want to make of this moment?
Right.
And then an answer came. And then when the answer came, then we did something and he went, oh, I love that. Right. But I think that happens sometimes more now in the process because we could swing the light or choose one of the 8 moving lights and the angle we want and get something really special.
Assuming you have that time.
Yes.
Assuming the tech, because now tech, I've started noticing the shows that have 27 musical numbers as opposed to 14. It's like, oh, we got 2.5 days to do this. Let's, does this light work? Okay, great. That's why pre-planning, having you as the designer need to have that plan. But that doesn't. Let's actually get back to your state of the industry. question. I think the future is LED. No. And I heard your Can Rant a few weeks ago, so we'll skip that.
Wait, did you not agree with the Can Rant? I'm curious.
No, I agreed with it. I'm going to miss them.
I am too.
What I'm really going to miss I'm going to miss ACLs.
Yes.
You just can't. Right. Source 4 PARs don't do it. Right. And it's just, man, especially for rock stuff, it's just.
But there's some beam lights out there. There are some 2-degree, 4-degree beam lights out there that'll do.
Well,
if you can afford them,
budgetarily, right.
That was my point.
And even then they don't have that punch. They got to be able to, like, so bright. And it's it's great. Yeah, if you can afford 100 Sharpies, but they're sort of a one-trick pony, and the Sharpie was great for what it does. But that's all you're going to do with it. God forbid you try. And actually, in Nairobi, we had.
Well, same with an ACL. It's all you're going to do with it too.
Right, but that's a lower amount of your budget that's going to that. I complain that the Sharpie's a one-trick pony. What I'm about to say, though, is I feel like from our friends who are the moving light manufacturers, I would not want to be a moving light manufacturer or a rental shop purchaser. Decider guy. Yeah. It's brutal out there because everybody's making a wonderful product. We're in the world where, everything works. Like the low ends, quote, in cheap or inexpensive products work, and they're rock solid. Whereas it used to be, in the early 80s, it's like, oh, there's 24 Verilights on that show. 18 of them are working tonight. And that wasn't Verilight's fault. That was the state of the industry. And there was a team of talented electricians maintaining, the guys on Wicked were like, they had a whole garage full of stuff they were fixing every day. But I think we're expecting so much from our manufacturers now that every light has to do every damn thing. I would like to see the pendulum swing back a little bit and somebody say, this light is going to do face light, and it's just going, it's going to do a.
So less Swiss Army knives.
It zooms and it does a soft light and it does beautiful colors, beautiful subtle colors, and it's quiet. Or, but it doesn't have an animation wheel, and it doesn't throw in a beam bender thing that makes it an ACL Prisms, when you want it, and all this stuff. That's not to take away from the lights that are doing that, and they're super valuable, and they're great. But man, you can, and then you say, well, how do you like the light by so and so? And they say, oh, the colors were noisy when the thing moved. When it moved full speed, spinning 720 degrees around, and the 5 different color wheels spun out at once. It's like, what do you want? I mean, holy crap, man. It's just, there's so much stuff in there.
Yeah. It's a lot to get through.
Yeah. So there's not going to be a perfect light, and it can't satisfy everything. Yeah.
Well, I think you're right. When you first said that everything's moving the projectors, and when that happens, and we can imagine through VR or whatever, what the light and the atmosphere needs to be, it really will be immaterial what these individual lights will do, because we won't be using them.
Right.
So that's what I am hoping for. And I know and Stan will knows this as well, that's where a lot of manufacturers are actually looking at right now.
Yeah.
Yep. We have been whispered to about that. And so the idea that, let me just put some language, that the notion that we would light a stage like we do stage lighting, pixel by pixel.
Right.
That sounds
right. I think you're going to lose though. So if you put your projectors front of house and they're balcony rail,
they're everywhere.
They're everywhere.
They're everywhere.
So you think there's 20 projectors?
It's 360, 180 pixel by pixel generation of what and dynamic.
That's a lot of laser projectors. Sure, that's my concerns. I don't want to lose the angles. I don't want to lose the revelation of form.
No, the angles have to be there, absolutely, because it's the shadow that you want, right? It's the shadow.
It's all about shadows. It's always all about shadows.
Yeah. I love talking about this sort of thing, and it's great to hear your points of view, Eric. And unfortunately, right now we're out of time, so we have to thank you. First of all, we have to thank you for being here today. This was really fascinating. There's so much here for our students and for our listeners to learn from. I especially love your points about MIT. I think that was quite fascinating.
That's a very cool story.
Thank you so much for sharing it. And I do want to definitely want to see Tinga Tinga Tales Nairobi, because I love that type of theater.
Yeah, we've probably got a video of it.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to thank you for being a great ambassador for us overseas.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure.
Well, guys, that Hammond organ solo tells us that once again you've spent another morning listening to Light Talk. Be sure to follow us on our Facebook group page and subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, Spotify, and just about any other podcast service out there. And be sure to subscribe to Light Talk. That way you won't miss 1 second of crazy Lumen insanity.
And just remember that no guarantee is offered regarding the accuracy of any of Herrick's statements or mine or David's on this podcast. However, if you do decide to litigate us, the law firm of Flecht, Flock, Flair, and Glare and their adorable paralegal Snoot will defend us until our retirement funds are depleted.
Light Talk is written and produced by the Lumen Brothers, coming to you from Long Beach, Gainesville, and this week from New York City.
Yeah, Times Square.
And be sure to tune in next week where we discuss low-angled lights, online portfolios, discrimination and gender bias in our profession, and Anne will be back visiting with us again.
All that and a new sponsor. Light Talk, broadcasting questionable Lumen knowledge and humor and wonderful interviews around the world.
So we'll see you all next Saturday morning. Hey, thanks again, Herrick. It's great to have you with us.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure.
Light Talk.